Film Club.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Film Club. I'm one of your hosts, Andy Harrison, and with me, as always, it is Andy Donaldson.
Hola.
Every week in Film Club, we invite you along to watch a film with us, and this week, we're starting the Mexico trilogy with El Mariachi.
This tells a tale of a mariachi, a wannabe mariachi, who comes into a town. He thinks, oh yeah, I'm going to be really lucky. That luck shifts because he can't get work anywhere, and he gets mistaken for a hitman or like another crime boss. There's two feuding factions. He's caught in the middle because he's just dresses like one of the bosses, and somehow he manages to has pinpoint accuracy, and he ends up being like getting back at both bosses and kind of quelling the feud by killing everyone. This is really interesting that you chose this last week because years back, my infamous collection of Dad's DVDs, he always used to buzz over Desperado and Once Upon a Time in Mexico, and he'd say, "Oh, Andrew, watch these. It's really cool. Look at these scenes." And we watch them, coming into my years of like appreciating film, and just these kind of like proper cut back, stylish westerns, Bond westerns to some extent. And we'd love it. But you always said, I've never watched the first one. I know that it's in Spanish. And I never got round to actually watching it in El Mariachi. And little did I know last week when he said it, it didn't click on that it was El Mariachi, the start of the Mexican trilogy. Mm-hmm. So I'm buzzing. I'm fucking buzzing that we watched this. It was a great film. It was so fun. It's Robert Rodriguez at one of his best. Is it his debut? I don't know. You'll know.
Yeah, so this is Robert Rodriguez's first film. It's notorious for being one of the smallest budget films, I don't want to say ever made, but it's one of the smallest budget films who have had such a wide release. And then I believe it became, at the time, the smallest budget film to ever surpass $1 million at the box office. Did really well for him. This launched Robert Rodriguez's career. It was meant to go like straight to DVD. He was working with, I believe, a $7,000 budget.
Yeah, it was supposed. I think it was 9. Then he actually made a few savings. So he had a small budget and managed to save on his already small budget. So I think it was 9 that turned into 7. Yeah,
it's crazy. Like he's done talks over the years around like how he did it, and the approach was essentially just don't spend any money. He sort of said, I believe, the actual final budget. If he hadn't have had to pay for film and for telecine, because what he did was he shot the whole thing on 16mm.
Yeah.
And then he would telecine it back over to video to avoid the cost inherent with cutting on film. So what he ended up spending money on ultimately came to only a couple $100.
The lengths that he went to rein back on budget and kind of consolidate and just be frugal as hell in making this film is incredible.
A lot of that comes through in the character and the charm of the film. And I think that this film, El Mariachi, is probably my favorite of the Mexico trilogy. I think that it's the one that, before he becomes sort of like completely submerged in B-movie grindhouse, like he does that thing really well. He does the B-movie grindhouse thing really, really well, probably better than any other director out there. But there is something about El Mariachi that's a little bit more natural. But then it also has the rough around the edges thing of making your first film. Even some of the simple filmmaking technique where he does sort of stagger a little bit. There's definitely moments in this where he's a little bit too obsessed with close-ups and a little bit too obsessed with mid-shots, and it becomes a bit geographically confusing at first. But the grand scheme of things, what does that really matter for a film like this? It has so much of a charm in that he's happy to do a little bit of drama, a little bit of romance, a little bit of action, and a little bit of comedy. And some of those comedy moments have me like genuinely laughing out loud. I love the running gag about the bartenders drinking the beer when he keeps asking for a bottle.
It's the way they drink it, they just go, nice.
Or like the tiny little look that he gives Domino when she serves him an actual bottle straight away.
Yeah, I noticed that part. I was thinking that must be that'll be intentional. But that's it though. It's really fun. It's such a fun film, and it's quite short. It's only like 80 minutes long, roughly, and it didn't leave me at the end wanting more. But at the same time, it definitely didn't feel too long. It was perfectly paced for me anyway. I'm so glad we watched it. I really enjoyed. I don't normally get subtitle film, but I really like this in Mexican. It was one of the ones that really, really work, at least for me. And I thought the main character, who is Carlos Gallardo, which is interesting because he got recast in the later two things by Antonio Banderas. So but he was class. He was really fun, and I can understand why they might have recast. You know, a bigger budget, bigger project. You know, maybe more people. It was also English instead of Mexican. It probably is a bit Mexican. It's been ages since I watched Desperado. So yeah, it was. It's really interesting, but I thoroughly enjoyed Carlos Gallardo.
He's great, isn't he? Like Antonio Banderas really works in the later films, but here this guy's like a bit more of an everyman. He feels a bit more relatable. He feels a bit more like grounded, down to earth. I love that he does. Obviously, he gets a couple of good shots off, and maybe there's a slight implication that he's meant to be just accidentally naturally talented with a gun. That sort of gets blown out of proportion later on in the later two films when he becomes this like mythical figure.
Yeah.
Here, it's way more real. It does just kind of feel like a guy who just bumbled his way through it. And even the suitcase full of guns is just like, the guitar case full of guns. Even that is just a guitar case that is holding guns, whereas obviously later on it would go to become like the rocket launcher and all that sort of stuff.
Yes, that's the scene I remembered. I was thinking, when I saw him come in here with the guitar, I was thinking, wow, what's the special gimmick? What's the special gimmick? Not just full of guns. And I was like, no, that's cool. I love that. You know, origin story and everything.
Weirdly, the ending for me feels a lot like Mad Max. You know, like where you leave him on the bike with the hat, the glove, the hand. Yeah. You've got like the suitcase full of guns. You've got the dog on the back of the bike. The whole thing is a little bit like, you remember in Mad Max where you leave at the very end of the film with the character finally fully formed, and you're about to go and then have the sort of more exotic adventures. Do
you know what this film reminded me of? Probably why I enjoyed it so much. Big Trouble in Little China.
I think it's a great film. I think it came at such a wonderful time. It was that 1992 period where it like notoriously released very, very close to Reservoir Dogs, and you had the formation of Robert Rodriguez and Quentin Tarantino's friendship at that point. 2 years later, you get Clerks, which is like launching the careers of people who can just scrape together the money to pay for the materials. After that sort of era was over, we ended up having video come in and flood the market and drown out some of these voices in lots of ways. And I love that El Mariachi just impressed people so much that it was able to launch the career of Robert Rodriguez.
100% this film. I thoroughly loved it.
So there is El Mariachi. You can let us know in the comments below what you thought of El Mariachi. But next week, Andy and I are going to be back to continue this little trilogy because it's time to take a look at Desperado.
Taking a look at rocket launchers, miniguns.
Until then, get watching.
Cheers, guys.